Hey there, Called and Caffeinated community. I am so excited to bring you this episode with the amazing Father Gregory Pine of Pints with Aquinas and Godsplaining podcast fame. But I wanted to first take a quick minute to update you on some crazy stuff that's been happening in my life. My daughter is born. She was born 8 weeks premature via emergency C-section. I had something called a placental abruption, which basically means that the organ that was supposed to nourish my baby was a loser and didn't do its job. Honora Marie Summereau was born in January. We named her Honora, which is spelled honor with an A, after my great-grandma. It's an old Irish name. And we call her Nora for short, and she's an absolute angel. I love her so much. Unfortunately, during the delivery, Nora's brain was deprived of oxygen, and that affected not only her brain, but also pretty much every organ in her body. She got a diagnosis of cerebral palsy, and she's had 2 surgeries, and she's going to need at least 1 more before she leaves the NICU. My entire family has left our house, so I'm living at my parents' house right now because we had to go to a hospital in Fairfax, Virginia, where there was a bigger team of specialists to help deal with all of her medical complications. I think today's day 51 and counting. She probably won't be home for at least another month. I've been blessed by your prayers. I feel like grace and prayer is really what's keeping me going. I have been blogging to just, share her journey and what I'm learning and what it's teaching me. This is definitely going to be its own episode at some point. But despite this very rough start to the year, I am so excited for the Holy Land pilgrimage. It is going to be an amazing, amazing time. We're going to go walk in the footsteps of Jesus. I'm going to bring baby Nora strapped into her front pack. I'm crafting this program about discerning life choices so that you can make all of your choices with purpose, with passion, and with peace. And this is something you're not going to find on any other pilgrimage out there. We're going to go to Mount Tabor. We're going to go to Bethlehem, Nazareth, Jerusalem, all of the sites that are important in the life of Christ. Single people, married people, you are invited to join me. This is going to be a once-in-a-lifetime adventure, and that is going to be 9 days starting on January 17th. I know with all the crazy events in my life, I'm just dreaming about going there and seeing what God has in store. You can learn to walk in his footsteps in a brand new way, and you can hear him speaking to you in the places where he once walked. Spots are filling up, people are registering, so this is a really amazing opportunity, and I hope you will come join us. This episode is sponsored by Catholic Match. Now, I have a wonderful Catholic Match story. I met my husband on CatholicMatch.com. It's the largest dating app specifically for Catholics, and obviously my life is a testament to how it works. So I know when I first joined, I had my hesitations about online dating, but it is really the new norm. I've met so many couples who have met on Catholic Match. I can't recommend it highly enough. It's harder than ever to meet good Catholic singles. Free to get started, no commitment. Look around, see who's on the site, maybe connect with some people, and you can create a profile for free. So you just go on over to CatholicMatch.com/calledandcaffeinated. And when you use that link, it does help support the show as well. Totally give Catholic Match a try. All right, now let's get to the episode with Father Gregory Pine.
Father Gregory Pine, thank you so much for being with me here on Pints with Aquinas. Called and Caffeinated.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nailed it. What's up?
Yeah. Do you have a caffeinated beverage? I know it's 8 p.m. there, right?
So I have this tumbler. I won't tell you what's inside though. All right, I'll tell you what's inside. There's nothing inside. So I brought it as a prop. I remember you told me to bring something. And then I was like, I can't.
You get a pass because it's 8 p.m. So,
Thank
right?
you.
Is that right?
Yes. It
2
is 8
p.m. my time. Okay.
Correct.
You're fine. Actually, more than half my guests on the show don't drink coffee. And when I started the show, I was like, everybody loves coffee. Like, we're going to have amazing conversations over coffee.
Yeah.
And then half my guests are like, I'm drinking water, drink a coffee, drink a decaf, whatever. Decaf is fine. But they're like, yeah, no. Or they'll be like, no, I already have my coffee. I'm like, womp womp. You clearly didn't read the questions.
Yeah, no, I read them. I just spurned them. I drink coffee. I couldn't actually for a while. Check this out. For a while, this is boring, but who cares? My life is boring. So the things that we're going to get to are also boring. So from boring to boring, it's like from grace to grace, except different. I had this problem with my throat for a while where I couldn't drink or eat a bunch of stuff. And I still can't eat or drink a handful of things, but the list is shorter, thanks be to God. But there was a while where I couldn't drink alcohol and I couldn't drink coffee and blah, blah, blah. Cry me a river. Who gives a rip? But like every time I would be on Pints with Aquinas, Matt Frad would be like, and what are you drinking? And I'd be like, I'm drinking water, or I'm drinking this ginger turmeric tea. And I just felt like such a tool. I mean, I am, but I felt it acutely and especially in those moments. So now I can drink beer again. Thanks be to God. Can't really do it. But so yeah, I can ante up and just do that. Although I forgot to do the last 8 times. Whatever, who cares? Yeah, you get it.
But I do have a question for you actually about that, because I have seen you drinking coffee, or at least I've seen Matt Fradd drinking coffee on Pints with Aquinas. And I've literally never even talked to Matt Fradd before. But I was like, I have no problems whatsoever with his show, but just one. Categorically, doesn't it make, if he's hosting Pints with Aquinas, and he's drinking coffee on Pints with Aquinas, he's betraying his namesake, doesn't that make my show just categorically superior with caffeinated in the name?
That's bold. It's hard to say. I think that this would be kind of like a good Ecclesiastes moment. You know, like each thing is beautiful in its time, you know, for every season, turn, as made famous by the birds. So there's a time to drink coffee and there's a time to drink alcohol. And I think, you know, like maybe Americans have somewhat, what would I say, disordered sensibilities about the consumption of alcohol. I'm not saying that they drink too much or that they drink too little. I'm just thinking like because of prohibition, you know, things got wonky and we attributed moral significance to a thing which typically didn't have that much moral significance, or the type of moral significance that we attributed to it. And so now we're like kind of coming back into a healthy drinking culture as signaled by like, you know, the proliferation of microbreweries. You can get all kinds of flavored beers these days, some of which taste like somebody ashed a cigarette in a cup of water.
Yes, they do.
It's a
I've tried those.
Right. So yeah, you can find all kinds of things. And I think probably what he is doing is he's enculturating his listeners into a healthy drinking culture. And so he doesn't want to scandalize because they know that he might record at 9 a.m. or he might record at 9 p.m. And if he were to drink at all times, they would suspect him of being a wine bibber and a drunkard like the Lord before him. And so he's slow playing. I've never spoken about this theme, but that's my inventive
You should ask him next time. Actually, that's true. That's a really good point. I read somewhere that
don't give me much. Don't agree with me. I don't deserve to be agreed with.
No, I hadn't thought it. Well, I hadn't thought of it in quite that way. I think because you're smarter than I am, I'm just going to agree with you for this whole interview. So I'm either going to ask you questions. No, okay. Well,
fruitful dialogue comes as a result of direct contrariety.
We'll see how this goes.
Contrariety.
Contrary. I'm going to have to look that one up.
Yeah.
Never
when
thought
the noun
about that.
fails, just use the adjective. Comes as a result of being contrary.
There you go.
So I preached a men's retreat recently. I will not say where. I will not say to whom. But I was like giving kind of inventive advice on how to live virtuously. And I was thinking like, okay, things that you wouldn't ordinarily envision in terms of virtue, I think it's good to bring them into the sphere of virtue. Not so that you can be moralizing and be like, now I have rules for more of my life. But that's so that you can think about your life as, you know, something whole, something integral, something that's trained on happiness and which ought to be conducted in that direction. And there aren't like exceptions to that. Like this is a happiness choosing act. And this is like a lay on my floor in a pool of my own self-pity act. It's like, no, those things are all under the same category. And so I was saying like, you guys should drink better alcohol, right? I think it's like, for instance, when you buy natural ice, there are a few people in the world who actually like it. There's some people who like rusty beer, which, you know, it's whatever, de gustibus. But most people don't like rusty beer. So if you buy that, you're buying it because it's a cheap way to consume, you know, international beverage units, which is whatever, but you could also just like dehydrate yourself and then do a headstand and experience something similar, and it's free, you know? So I was like, no. So my counsel to them was, you know, you got your alcohol budget, spend it on good things, right? Good things where you're like, not that you're becoming like all elitist about it, where you're like, oh, do you pick up on the tasting notes of dried fruit and fresh herbs? It's like, no. Okay. Like bourbon, for instance, only tastes like 3 things. It tastes like vanilla, it tastes like caramel, and it tastes like oak. If anyone says anything else, they're making it up. It's controversial. But I said like, yeah, like invest in better alcohol, because then you can actually have like a culture that's contemplative, that's leisurely, that's like life-giving, rather than one that's like, all right, step 1, start drinking. Step 2, there is no step 2.
Oh man. So as a Dominican, do you share that you're allowed to have beer? Do you also have are you allowed to have like hard liquor and stuff if you want to?
Yeah. Okay. I think some would balk at that. Like some religious would balk at that because of the poverty or because of like the expense or like basically the association in people's mind between liquor and higher price. So they wouldn't want to give scandal, you know, which I understand. But no, there's like a long tradition in Christendom of alcohol and religious life. All the best stuff basically comes from monasteries. So
yeah, gotcha. That's true. Chartreuse. Yeah. I have yet to try Chartreuse, but when I'm not pregnant, that would be great. But I like what you're saying about just savoring your life. I heard of, my sister went to Thomas Aquinas College, and I know that one of the, I don't know if it was one of the professors there or something, used to have dinner parties with like wine and music pairings and pairing that with the food as well. And I just think that's such a beautiful thing to celebrate these senses that we've been given. Like it's just such a basic, you know, such a basic need being met, but in like a really elaborate way. Yeah, I love that.
I'm going to say things. So I went to, like you said, I went to Steubenville, and my senior year, I got involved with communion. Speak clearly, young man. Communion and liberation, which whenever people hear that, they're like, "Oh my gosh, that must be wildly unorthodox." False. It's awesome. It's based out of I guess Milan, Italy.
Okay.
And so it's a lay ecclesial movement with different aspects to it, but it was founded by Monsignor Luigi Giussani, and the whole idea is like the journey to the truth is an experience, right? So it's about kind of weighing your life in a way that's engaged, and they threw like the best jammers. It was incredible.
Awesome.
They have retreats, and like they'd start the retreats by listening to some piece of classical music, which I was, you know, kind of incapable of appreciating because I'm a brute. But then you'd have some spiritual conferences, and then you'd have something, you know, like liturgical or paraliturgical. And then you'd go to somebody's house, and like Chiara at the stove would make homemade pasta sauce from like 4 ingredients, and she'd have it all shipped from Milan, you know, like express mail from her mother. And then somebody else would be like stirring this huge polenta pot, and somebody else was like dishing out risotto over here. These are all like heavy carb things, so probably not all of these occurred in the same evening. But then they'd sing like delightful music. They drank alcohol, they'd smoke Tuscan cigars, and they enjoy each other's company. Right. And it was the type of thing where I was like, where have I been? You know, like this is just so delightful. This is so good. And it gives a peculiar kind of testimony to the fact that like life is to be lived. Not to say that life is to be drunk away, or smoked into oblivion, but that like life is for living. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know that I have a more profound point to make than that, but it was very good for me.
It's just a new way of doing things. Like I've started making, so I grow my own tomatoes and basil, and then I started making my own pasta sauce. And I have like been doing research on how to make like the perfect Italian pasta sauce. And I got to say, this year, I think I got it right in some of the batches. And I had this one tomato plant that was given me, I think it gave me 60 tomatoes over the course of the season. It was incredible. So I have so much tomato sauce that I have frozen in my freezer right now. But the experience of like just opening a jar of tomato sauce for 88 cents from Aldi versus trying your own tomato sauce is so different when you have made it yourself and you've watched those tomatoes grow from seeds. It really does. I think it's so easy to get so much stuff now that appreciating where things come from, first of all, and then appreciating the company and, you know, really living through all of those things. It's harder to do. It's, I don't have a more profound point either, but maybe that's people here will be inspired to go make their own tomato sauce or buy some.
I love how like unintentionally crunchy this conversation is getting, because like now I'm thinking about like places where I've had vegetables that actually taste like something, because my experience of tomatoes is typically that they don't taste like anything. The outside of the tomato is kind of, it's like cellophane. Can you picture that kind of cellophane feel? Where like the outside of a tomato rips more than it actually tomatifies, if that's
tragic.
It's not,
tragic,
but it is. And then the insides, you're like, look at all of these gross seeds. I wonder what these will taste like. The answer, I will tell you, it tastes like nothing. Okay, they taste like texture. Unless you get plum tomatoes and they're like, these are a little hardier. I think I'll make myself some bruschetta, right? But like, you get good tomatoes and you're like, good night. These things taste great. And you get like good lettuce and you're like, this has a feel to it, right? It's velvety. There's like something happening, all right? And they don't have a clue, to quote Lion King. Right? So I don't want to keep blathering about things that are unrelated to the theme that you actually want to discuss, but if you want me to make a wild transition from the texture of lettuce to what are we talking about? Prudence? We're talking about discerning life, right?
We are talking about discernment. Yeah. Go for it.
Okay, so
go for
here it comes. Ready? So
Ready.
the big point is that it's about being sensitive to what is, to the real. Okay.
Okay. Keep going. Love it.
The point of discernment, you ready for this? Is to become who you are meant to be. All right. You're like, wow, I didn't know that I had employed like an inspirational speaker to come and engage my 8th grade class. You be you. No, what do I mean? Okay. So like we are the type of things that are on the way, right? So we're not at the end. Yeah. So when anyone says like, you're just perfect, they don't actually mean that. Okay. Like if you were to look at your 3-year-old and you were to say, you, my friend, have it all going for you. What I want from you for the rest of your life is precisely nothing. In fact, we're going to chemically stunt your growth. We're going to keep you out of school, okay? And I don't want you engaging with other human beings. I'd be like, wow, that's crazy. All right, let me get on Google Voice, all right? Because I can't make calls to the United States otherwise. So 1-877-4 child. Okay, we're gonna need some help here. You know, okay. So like we're on the way. And how do you get to the goal, the destination, which is being a saint, you know, for the glory of God? It's to engage with what is actually real. Right. And I think a lot of people spend their lives with things that aren't real. Right. One of which things, and this is where I live when I'm being an idiot, is like in our own psychological states.
Yes.
Right. So I would submit to you, there's some reality to be had between your ears, but there's just not that much. Certainly not enough to detain us as much as we are detained by those thoughts.
That's so interesting. Yeah.
Maybe that's like a framer, okay? Like discernment or like making choices that redound to your happiness and God's glory is ultimately about like getting in there with real tomatoes and velvety lettuce.
Some velvety lettuce. So, okay, I love this. Actually, I've just been hearing that like the suicide rates now are higher than they have ever been. You know, so I actually think this is probably an extremely timely conversation because even those of us who aren't looking to, you know, anywhere close to jumping off a bridge are still going through so much up here. And I know like for women, that's like the struggle of life, right? Yeah. When I go give a talk to women, I'm like, ladies, you know, when you hear like 100 voices in your head and all the girls are like, yes. I'm like, guys, I don't know how this works for you or if this happens for you, but this is the story of our lives. Yeah. So I think a lot of discernment, and I find this often with people, a lot of discernment is just clearing away the weeds so you can plant those seeds. And the seeds are really simple usually, but clearing away the weeds is often a lot more work because people are scared. People are afraid of failure. They're afraid of, you know, just stepping out and trying something new. And often it's just taking one step, putting one foot in front of the other, that actually gives you the answer. And it's action so much more than like thinking about it. Yeah. So, okay, before we get too much farther in that, I love the framework that we set up here. What calls have you received from God in your life so far? And what has receiving those calls looked and felt like for you?
Ooh, excellent. I love it. So what I've been called to, short answer is I have no idea. But I think that I've been called to be Christian, right? To like go to Steubenville, to join the Dominicans, to be a priest. Those would be like concrete things to which I think I am called. You know, kind of apart from that, I think that I've done some things and that other things have happened as a result of those things. Stuff could have gone otherwise, you know, but it went this way, for which I'm grateful, I suppose. Certainly not regretful, but also like not entirely convinced that this was the best possible way. I just know it's the way. So what does it mean for me? Speak clearly, speak simply, Father Gregory. What does it mean for me to like be called? I think that like basically the Lord makes you a certain way, all right, with a particular temperament in a particular family, as supported by a particular community, as educated in a certain context, as in a time and place. Sorry, I'm like squirming over here. I'm tucking my legs under my chair because I'm just,
you gotta do. You got one of those habits on, so you gotta.
Yeah, I've also got like limbs that just. Yeah. All right. So, right. So I think that like, what does it mean for you to be called? It means for you to respond generously, given what you are, where you are, who you are, when you are. Okay. And I think that means being in tune with who you are, what you love, and how God is healing and elevating those desires. Okay. So like, for instance, I think I probably could have gotten married and been happy. I could have gotten married to like person A or person B or person C. I don't know that I'm especially good at the courting of any of those persons, so I wouldn't go on listing beyond that, lest I sound, very accomplished in the dating scene. Right? But like, I'm not like a big fan of soulmate theories, which describe being called in terms that are like super, super concrete and almost deterministic. Like God has this plan, and you can either blow it and be miserable, or figure it out by your own genius and then be head over heels happy. It's like, I don't know. So like, how has the Lord made his will known? I mean, he made me Christian, like he poured grace into my soul. He had me born into a family with like two really good parents, very faithful parents, loving sisters and a brother. And, like I went to a good school, decent school, and I was encouraged by friends, and I just kind of like found myself where I am. But as to like, did I choose any of those things? I mean, kind of, like I didn't really resist the tendency of the Lord's indications that led me in those directions. But I don't think that I was like, like using all of my brain power, exercising Herculean moral courage, or like, I don't know, like really figuring much out. I think it just kind of all fell in my lap. So if that's what it means to be called, then yeah, I was called to these things.
How did you first get in touch with the Dominicans?
With a book, by a book, through a book. I struggle with prepositions. By means of a book.
Use them all.
Exactly.
So, there you go.
As of or pertaining to a book. So if you ever come across Louis de Wall, I don't know if he actually pronounced his name, but
my husband probably has, but I have not.
Just like a dude who writes books, writes. I just combined the past and the present tense because he did it in the past, but he wrote stories, which should be described in the historical present. So I was trying to give you a little combo factor.
There you go. That was skillful. Wrapped it all up.
Thank you.
Word economy.
Yep. He wrote books like late 40s to, I want to say, the 60s, historical fiction, Lives of Saints. He wrote this one about St. Thomas Aquinas, which is super charming. If I were to go back to it, I might think differently. But at the time, when I was 19, I loved it. So, that summer, what did I do? I went to Medjugorje that summer, and then I came back, and then I was nannying for my cousins in Portland, Maine. And I had oodles of time to read because they kept a light social calendar, and they're like, yeah, you be you. And I was like, sweet. So I read this book, and I was just really inspired by the way that St. Thomas Aquinas loved the Lord.
Yeah.
So I'd been encouraged to pick up the book because I'd gone to a lecture at Steubenville by a professor from St. Louis University named Eleanor Stump, and she spoke on Aquinas on the nature of love, and that was the first encounter that I'd had with his theology, which I found really, really, really engaging. Like she was giving kind of a basic kind of philosophical description of how we are to understand love and kind of how we're to operationalize it, as it were. And I was just like, dude, this is great. And so that's kind of got me interested in St. Thomas. I picked up that book, and at the end of it, I was like, yeah, I want to become a Dominican priest, at which point I hadn't actually met a living one. So
very interesting. Okay. So then you had to translate from head into like living heart. Yeah. What did that look like? I mean, your heart was already in love with Thomas Aquinas, but you had to find out about the lifestyle. And it's interesting you're saying this because my husband actually did the same thing as you.
Okay.
He read, I can't remember what the book is.
Twilight. Harry Potter. I'll keep guessing.
Wait, was it Thomas Merton? Keep going. It was Thomas Merton. It's something by Thomas Merton. And he fell in love with the Carthusian way of life without ever having actually met them before. But okay, so that translation from like, love this now into my real life, like how did that work for you? Because you mentioned you dated some girls.
Right. So like, I would say this, I am a prideful human being, right? And the Lord sees fit to humble prideful human beings according to his own timing and his perfect providence. And for whatever reason, like that would have been a perfect opportunity to humble me. I was like, I'm going to become a Dominican priest. I am so confident. I am so capable. I am so ready. And then he could have been like, you're an idiot. And I would have been like, fair enough. And then he could have been like, all right, do this other thing. And I'd be like, right. But for whatever reason, it ended up like horseshoes and hand grenades. You know, when you throw kind of errantly for days and days and days, eventually you hit your target or come close enough. So I happened upon it. First try, which is cool.
Awesome.
So I started visiting the community, which was great. And I found the liturgy very beautiful, the emphasis on study and preaching very beautiful. And when I went to a vocation weekend, one of my friends, mentors, one of the priests in the province to whom I look up the most, he gave this lecture about a simple line that St. Thomas wrote. It's basically when you translate this text from his Summa Theologiae, it reads, to contemplate and to give to others contemplata, which means like either contemplated things or God himself contemplated. And he said like basically the vocation of a Dominican friar is to himself be transformed by the mysteries of Christ's life, which mysteries are kind of made available in the church and applied through the sacraments. But in a peculiar way, a Dominican seeks to conform himself to Christ in those mysteries through a contemplative life. And then he turns his face, as it were, to the people of God. And it's supposed to be like in his transfigured visage. They're supposed to see like, wow, God lives, right? The Lord Jesus is risen. He's changed the humanity of this man. And this man is able to give testimony to a God whom he has seen. And so there's a kind of overflow from that contemplative act, which spills over the bottom lip of the preacher and flows forth in a tumble of words, which words are supposed to give concrete expression to the vocation itself. So I heard this and I was like, yeah, let's go. And so, I kept visiting, and there are things about it that I didn't like. I would say that socially, I exhibit decent amounts of anxiety, kind of like introverted person. And if people aren't talking in a conversation circle, I'm like, I'm responsible for making this conversation happen. Let us find common themes of interest. And if you ever sit down at a table with like 5 Dominicans, they just like look around and like, you guys want to talk about something? We could all just be silent and eat our food. And I was like, so that was tough, but you make it through.
You make it through. That's so funny. That's so interesting. You were the one carrying the conversation. Actually, I know one other Dominican, Father Aquinas Beale. And he seems like one of the ones who would be totally just like all about the contemplation during mealtime.
Wow, I'll tell him you said that. He's a dear soul. Do you know him well? Were you in formation with him? We're in formation. Yeah, we overlapped for 3-4 years.
Yeah. So I want to read you a quote of yours. I loved. Yeah, I know. Here it comes. You're like, oh, sweating. So you were a part of our God's Adventure Awaits Summit this past year, which was about vocational discernment. And I loved, there was a talk that you were able to contribute, which was the Theology of Vocation according to St. Thomas Aquinas. Did I get that title right?
Sounds right.
Okay. All right. So this is like my favorite discernment quote of all time. So I'll just read it to you. So you said this: what is it that you love? What kind of wild and marvelous holy daydreams do you have about ministry and apostolate and giving testimony to the glory of God in your life? It doesn't have to be complicated or induce anxiety, and it shouldn't be something that occasions analysis paralysis, because ultimately God gives the growth and he trains up our desires, and he will draw us to himself until we are ready to embrace that for which we are made. So I think that just sums up so much about discernment in such a beautifully simple way. But I'd love to hear more about the part of, any comment you have to offer on that, but also about embracing that for which we are made and God kind of drawing up our desires.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I think that God makes us differently, right? Mm-hmm. So I think we begin there, because you can just ask, like, what's the point of creation? Creation is not to serve God's needs, right? Or God's lack, because God doesn't have needs and God does not lack. Mm-hmm. So creation is by contrast, to the contrary, by contrast. Woo!
Those prepositions.
Doing great. Right. So it's to give testimony, right? It's to make manifest how good God is. But God, like you can't sum God up with one created thing. And so he creates a variety of excellent created things, all of which kind of when taken together, give you just a hint or a taste but each contributes in its own way, right? So I would say like each individual human being is meant or intended to give testimony to God's glory in a way uniquely suited to him or her. So the question for you is not so much like, how do I become a saint like X, Y, or Z other person, right? Whom I idolize or whom I envy or by whose witness I'm actually depressed because it's so far beyond what I am capable of. The question is like, what is God doing in you? Like respond to that.
Yeah.
All right. And how does one determine what God is doing in her? Well, by consenting to and cooperating with the graces that God is actually giving you. Right. So not like lamenting past graces that you may have forfeited or like lusting after future graces, which may never actually be given. You know, like, I just can't wait until God makes me the most excellent figure skater, you know, in U.S. history. She's like, dude, get over it. Been done. So things like that, I think, actually hamstring our efforts to give concrete witness to God's glory. When in truth of fact, you might have talents that are humble, that are seemingly insignificant, that are weird. Okay. You could be like the best. What are weird things? What are weird things that I do? So that way I'm not like accusing anyone. I'm just owning it. You could have like a very refined sense of smell. Okay. Yeah. And you could work in the Yankee Candle lab, right? So as to determine what scents will actually best induce Christmas cheer, because bringing Christmas cheer is actually a way of bringing glory to God. Because I can tell you, like, there is a serious dearth of Christmas cheer in some parts. And if singing loud for all to hear doesn't do it, you know, especially as sung loud by Zooey Deschanel, right, then you're going to need Yankee Candles. And those Yankee Candles are going to bring Christmas cheer. They're going to have to smell good. And if you have the best nose and the best palate for that, then get after it, okay? Don't think like, I don't know if I have the time to dedicate to Yankee Candle smelling because that's weird and I should do something normal. No, it's like you be you in this regard, all right? Get after the candles. So that's a bizarre example. Maybe that's not the most illustrative, but what I'm trying to say is that like God is making you a saint in a way that's particular and peculiar. And we draw encouragement from the lives of the saints, right? We draw concrete inspiration from them, and it is good to model your lives on those who have gone before us. But with the understanding, like, God is doing something unique. God is doing something different. And the way that he's going to make that known is by the desires that he has breathed into your heart. All right. And mind you, those desires just can't be like followed uncritically. You know, like, what I really want to do is go bungee jumping with a cord that's actually half severed so I can show how much I trust Jesus. Like, no, that's there's a word for that. It's called suicide. Bad idea. Right. So we need to criticize those desires. And what is the best for critiquing desires that are fallen? Well, grace, because grace heals those desires and it elevates those desires and it doesn't repress or suppress or oppress them. I don't even know if any of those things actually apply, but it draws them out, right? It actually makes them more pronounced, more express, and effectively, like, more visible. So that way we do no one any good by being like, you know what, I just want what God wants. Well, it's like, what do you want? Okay. Because that's what God is working with. Because if you're like, I'll do whatever he asks of me. I've just been listening for 57 years and never heard. You know, I've always really wanted to crochet like a fiend, but I need to set that aside because there's got to be a place in my heart for God's call. It's like, start crocheting now. Okay. And if God wants to redirect the course of your crocheting, he'll make it known. But what would be the point in God creating you as he has created you if he intended for that never to actually be, you know, like, operationalized or set in motion? I'm going to stop.
I love it. That's so much in there. I think one of the things that you touched on, which I think is so beautiful, is you just said very simply, give testimony to God in your life. Like, you're giving testimony to God in your life. That's the point. The point isn't to be productive. And so many people are talking about this now because we are such a productive society. We're so focused on chapstick, classic.
Oh, yeah. Always blue.
Oh, nice. Best. Okay. My husband and I have a joke. I'm giving him chapstick for Christmas because we have a joke that keeps us together because he always carries chapstick in his pocket and I never wear outfits that have pockets. And so when I need chapstick, he has it. And if he ever doesn't have chapstick, we're going to be it's, you know, got to keep that dependent relationship.
You can get it annulled if he forgets the chapstick. That's the good news, right?
That's the good news, right? Easy peasy.
That's a joke. That's a joke.
We put that in the...
That's a joke.
We put that in the prenuptial agreement. It's
perfect. Yeah, good. Great.
Yeah, good old prenup. Yeah. I love what you said about, so we are called to a certain work or a certain thing that we are supposed to do, but the point isn't to be productive to produce something. That's not the point of our lives. And I feel like we're always, as a Christian, you're always trying to come back from like, oh, I need to produce more. I need to do more. I need to, in order to be this thing I'm supposed to be, I need to do all this work. And there's, a lot of people have said, we're not human doings, we're human beings. But at the same time too, But at the same time too, we are supposed to produce something. We are supposed to do some kind of work. But I love how the work is just, the whole point of the work is to give testimony to the glory of God. And that can look like so many different things. And I think it just, for me, hearing that, it takes the pressure off of needing to give testimony to God in a way that the world says, yep, that's worth it. That's relevant. That's good. That's, does that make sense? Money, power, fame, whatever of those things that we're supposed to be achieving. It could be having a really good sniffer and getting those Yankee candles out the door.
Bingo.
Yeah.
So I have a variety of thoughts to volley back. One, your backdrop is immaculate. It's pristine, actually. And I'm thinking about it by comparison to my own. Because on that hutch over there, I have like a Christmas gift that I'm going to open up here pretty soon. Boots, trekking poles, gaiters, crampons, a winter cap, ski gloves, and exercise headphones.
When in Switzerland.
Strewn about there. I mean, I went from being embarrassed to being proud actually about it now. So
you should, Father Gregory. You need to have like an REI, like a glamping show.
Yes. No, that's next.
That can be the next show.
But apropos,
this is my bedside table, and I have my computer. So my bed is right over here, and you do not want to see the 4 loads of laundry next to it. And then also I had my husband shift the dresser over so that we could put the computer on top. So there's a whole mess of wires and cords. So it only looks nice from here.
But that's great.
I appreciate that.
No, that's great. That's fantastic.
Make it till you make it.
And then apropos of what you just said, I think I may have actually forgotten the comment that I was going to make. So you're talking about efficiency. Yeah, what's up? I think that huge emphasis needs to be placed on the fact that everyone has a contemplative vocation. Okay, so I said like our desires need to be criticized, and you made this point about we're not human doings, we're human beings, but also that with this big push for efficiency, it can end up becoming dehumanizing. And you're not going to give concrete testimony to God if you're not a human being, because you are intended to glorify God as a human being, right? Mm-hmm. Not as a machine, not as a monster. And for me, okay, so this is chastening because I am a human machine, right? I am an efficiency monster, and I get super thrown for a loop when like things cramp my efficiency style. So like today, for instance, I was sharing with you before we push record that I spent like the better part of 3 hours on this, what would I call it?
Crusade?
So I would say a pilgrimage, except that signifies that I'm coming to a place of higher enlightenment, which I don't think is actually what happened. I would say Death March maybe, or Hellscape, to kind of paint a more atmospheric picture, right? So I spent like 3 hours trying to ship a package, and it stank, and I was getting myself super tuned up because like I was losing out, or I was missing out, or I was not being most effective because I'm supposed to do whatever, like 32 hours worth of work on my dissertation and 10 hours worth of work on this thing on prudence, and then blah, 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 and thus and such. And I try to write, like, keep it pretty tight. But what ends up happening is I dehumanize my approach to life. And as a result of which, I begin to treat other people as obstacles, right? Or I treat other people as impediments to my attaining of my goals. But if your goals don't entail other human beings, your goals are false, right? Your goals are wrong. Now, I'm not saying you throw everything over the side and just hang out on your front porch and just wait for people to toddle by so you can engage them creepily in conversation. I'm not saying that, right? The things need to get done. But I think the things will get done, right? The things will get done. And the point is to like retain a hold on the Lord and retain a hold on your humanity so that as he heals and elevates your desires, you can be recollected in what it is that he's concretely calling you to. Right? Because if you just set out, you know, like kind of social justice warrior style on doing the things and doing them as efficiently as possible, you can end up losing your faith, right? Because you lose touch with the God who inspires that work and for whom it is conducted.
I think that's a big struggle for a lot of youth ministers, a lot of people who work for the church, because there's so many things to be done. Yeah. It's also a struggle for me as a mother, because I'm trying to get my kids out the door, and I'm like, we are having a meltdown because you can't get your shoes on and I'm trying to help you and you don't want me to help you. And the point is we have to get out the door and go to the park to get your energy out today. But the point really isn't to get out the door and go to the park. The point is to give my children an experience that is going to enrich their day. The point is to be their mother. And sometimes you can get so focused on like, we have to go and do this thing now. And I have to always come back to, okay, what's the larger point here? It's not, hey, we had a good day because we hit all of our quotas of, playing at the park for X number of minutes or whatever. It's that through the putting on the shoes experience, they learned something about God through me, or maybe I'm universalizing this too much, but yeah, like I guess I hadn't thought of it quite that way of like being a contemplative, but what is the point of our day? It's not to pass the time in this way. It's to guide them to be the people God's calling them to be. Wow. I will be thinking about that a lot.
Yeah.
That's
and
really
this
good.
brings us back to velvety lettuce and to delicious tomatoes, right?
Yeah.
The point is to engage with what is real, and having contemplative habits of mind and heart help you to recognize those things and to engage with them more fruitfully. So what are you doing? You're raising human beings, right? You're forming saints. And you can do that while putting on shoes. You can do that at the park. You can do that in a car accident. You can do that in all kinds of settings, right?
Yeah.
Some more and some less traumatic. But just because they may or may not align with or, kind of correspond to the plan as previewed at the beginning of the day doesn't necessarily mean that they're better or worse at forming. There's one thing that's bad for forming, okay? And that's deliberate sin. But even that the Lord can use, right? Even in those contexts, the Lord can be permitting and then drawing back, reforming, reshaping. Notice like the Christian is not encouraged to regret subsequent to sin. The Christian is encouraged to be penitent, which is to say that sin becomes fodder for growth and virtue, right? So I think that like the point of, emphasizing this contemplative thing is the point is to hold Christ's gaze, right? It's to look Christ in the face so that you can judge how to gauge this situation based on his reaction, as it were. And maybe that's a little too like wonky and personalistic, and I'm getting out some of my Italian sensibilities here. But like, that's the point.
I love it. No,
that's
right.
the point. Like, I mean, I need to finish a dissertation, or my province is going to be like, hey, you're a slob, and I'm never going to assign you ever again to anything because you stink. I'll be like, okay, yep, great, point taken, wonderful. Right, so I need to do the thing, right? But I think that the thing is going to get done because why? Well, because I know from past experiences that the other things have gotten done, right? Right? So like the Lord proved himself faithful.
Yeah.
Also, I trust like the assignment of my legitimate superiors. I trust the talents that the Lord has given me. I trust that even if I feel this kind of, I don't know what you would call it, like a sentiment of panic, that in each passing moment I'm not doing enough or I'm not accomplishing enough, yet that needs to be banished, like whether by methods of cognitive behavioral therapy or like by just sitting in the presence of the Blessed Sacrament. I need to train my mind to stop freaking out because it's enough. The Lord has promised to give me enough, and that's good.
It's beautiful. Yeah. I've heard you say in other interviews, you are saved according to how you were made. So what does that mean, and how in the heck does that apply to discernment?
Yeah.
Is that a Thomas Aquinas quote?
Basically,
or Thomistic
not really.
principle?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. I mean, like St. Thomas repeats that grace does not destroy nature, but it elevates it, or it heals or elevates nature. Okay, so it perfects nature.
Okay.
So if you think about creation as the blueprint and you think about redemption as the building, the act of building, it would be silly if God were to have, kind of mapped out our life and our future in one way, and then in a second sovereign act were to have completely scrapped that plan and then done something completely unrelated and different. That's what I mean, basically. So some of our desires are like fallen, right? Or they're all basically fallen, but some of them bear out the effects of the fall more concretely, right? So if you have like a fetish for eating 2 blueberries at a time while suspended upside down on a swing, whilst like trying to repeat the word Zanzibar, and you think that this is like an essential feature of your own growth, I'd be like, I mean, I don't know. Could be, but chances are low. Okay, so like that might be something that you're going to have to get over, right? Because if you're like really, really committed to doing that every day at 10 a.m., like you're never going to be able to travel that far from a playground. And you're also going to freak a lot of people out. And like young parents with their kids are going to be like, okay, so you leave now or we're going to call the police. And I would say that those things are all hurdles to you embracing your vocation. All right. But I would say like, all right, if you have the desire to be of service to other people, right, God's going to use that. I don't think a good way to discern is to say like, okay, I want to be of service to other people in a concrete way. And I've loved working with the missionaries of charity. I've always relished the opportunity, like, you know, to help out with the food drive or Habitat for Humanity or mission trips or yada, yada, thus and such, right? I derive great joy from that. I feel emboldened, enlivened, encouraged, animated by those efforts. And I think that my life is somehow bound up with that. I don't know how, but I think so. And then you have the subsequent thought, you know what? Maybe I enjoy those things too much. Right? Maybe that's an unhealthy attachment. Maybe the Lord is calling me to be a hermit or a contemplative nun. And maybe I should request a cell in the monastery that has no windows. And maybe I should shackle myself to my bed and never leave it. So that way I never draw unholy delight from these legitimate pursuits. Now that's crazy. Okay.
Right.
That's crazy. So this is what I mean when I say like the Lord saves you as he created you. Like who you are and what you love is a decent indication of what you're made for. Mind you, there are going to be exceptions to that rule, or some people are going to narrate their vocation story in a way that doesn't square with that principle. But I think that that is what we ordinarily find to be the case.
That's so interesting. Yeah, I've said this in on other episodes before, but when I was 16, I really thought I was supposed to be on Broadway. And I thought that that was the thing that was going to like fulfill me. You know, anytime you talk about like having ideas about your life, like that was that for me. And so I went to New York and I did 2 Broadway tours and, you know, and I did what I set out to do and found out that, you know, lo and behold, it wasn't making me happy. And it turns out like, as I was going, that really the desire that I thought I had, like what I loved was theater. But I needed to, there was a deeper layer of desire underneath that had yet to be kind of discovered and brought out. And it wasn't until I lived this kind of first dream that I realized like, actually, there's another dream that hasn't even been really realized yet. And I have come to realize that what I love so much about theater is actually a lot of the community around theater, the community experience of live performance. And I can get that in a much deeper, much more significant way through being a Catholic speaker and through my ministry than I do as a theater performer. So even though oftentimes it's a lot more humble than going on a national tour, it's more fulfilling to me. But there's kind of those layers of desire that you have that are deeper and deeper, if that makes sense. Does that resonate with you and your journey?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I think that, you know, like previous to wanting to become a Dominican, I wanted to be married. But like I had a variety of desires. It's just that those desires weren't especially coordinated, right? So I would have told you at the time that I wanted to be devout, right? I wanted to be given whole and entire to the Lord. I wanted that to be something, you know, like religious, which is to say like cultic. I wanted it to be worshipful in some concrete way. I wanted it to be great, you know, like magnanimous. I wanted to do great things worthy of great honors because they were great. I wanted to be perfect in charity. I wanted to be like the saints about whom I had read. And I just didn't see how all those desires were going to come together concretely. But when then I saw like St. Thomas loving the Lord as he did, it made eminent sense to me. Like this is how I am meant to love the Lord, you know, after the mode or after the manner in which this man loves the Lord, because it's devout, it's religious, it's magnanimous, it's charitable. It's what I want. And I just hadn't recognized it until such time as I saw it.
Yeah. Yeah. And those desires that you're describing they all have a horizon and they all have an aspiration and an upward sort of, what's the word? And it's a sense of being drawn upward as opposed to the opposite. Yeah. So you're describing, you sound, are you a perfectionist, if you don't mind my asking?
Am I a perfectionist? I think so. Yeah.
Okay. I had a question from someone. Actually, it's a young man in Switzerland. How weird is that? I had a question from a young man in Switzerland.
Bizarre.
And you know, he asked me, and I want to find it from him here.
Tell him I'll answer the question if he promises to do all of my shipping for me in the future.
Perfect. I will connect you to.
Thank you.
Perfect. He had a question that I would love to ask you, and I didn't send you this one in advance, but I feel like everything you're saying, actually, you would potentially have a really good answer for him. He said, so he is feeling called to be married. He's tried online dating. He said it led to some good conversations on the platform and in real life. It was a Catholic dating website. And then he said he's waiting patiently and trusting. He's kind of feeling like maybe he's not going to meet his wife through this platform. And he said, am I too romantic or perfectionist in my imagination about the right partner? Am I too romantic in thinking that I will have a strong feeling of being absolutely secure? Because he kind of said like earlier in the email that he felt that God would just kind of like tell him when it's the one. What would you say to him? Dating advice.
Right. I would say, so two of my best friends who are married, the one got married when she and her husband went to a concert, like a New Year's Eve concert, and they were just enjoying great music, enjoying great beer. They kissed and they're like, wow, that's great to meet you. And then they got married later. So there's that. And then one of my other best gal friends, she and her husband like knew each other in high school. And then like he joined the military, she did thus and such and blah, blah, blah. Both ended up moving back to the area. And then they met up like after a kind of wild rodeo events and then hit it off and got married within a year. Neither of which I would say are like Hallmark Christmas movie type situations. In the latter case, like there was, a marriage outside of the church and an annulment and blah, blah, and thus and so. Like it just didn't conform to the typical pattern that you would envisage. But both are very happy and have lots of kids and are pumped about life, still experience trial and difficulty.
Sure.
So I would say that, like happy marriages don't necessarily conform to a standard. Obviously, if you've tried online dating, you're not like thinking that your spouse will automatically materialize before you. So you're willing to put in some work. What I would say is that, like if you're desirous of getting married and you're a man, I think your chances are better. Whereas for women, I think your chances are worse because I think that there are a lot more well-adjusted, faithful Catholic women between the ages of, 22 and 35 than there are men. So for a man, I would say there's really no need to worry. And that's not to say for women, there is need to worry. But that's just simply to say that like, I think you'll have no problem. And I think that being anxious about the future can actually inhibit your ability to be free. But I think it's important that you just continue to go to places where you can meet people. And that's hard in COVID tide, right? It's especially difficult when like in Switzerland, all the restaurants and bars are closed. It's just like to find good places. Like in Switzerland, there are a lot of cool kind of lay Catholic apostolates like Adore, and Communion Liberation is big here. And like a variety of university movements. Just go and meet people and then invite people on dates and blah, 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 and thus and such. So I don't think that you're necessarily going to know on the first date or on the third date or on the 18th date. But I think that like, so for people who, for instance, struggle with anxiety, I give this advice. If you're anxious and you've had like a series of short dating relationships and you continue to break them up because they don't conform to a perfect standard, I typically recommend something along the lines of exposure therapy, right? Just spend longer your next relationship. So give yourself a date. Like I'm not going to think about breaking up until this date. And whenever the thoughts of breaking up come up, just table them, just kind of set them aside. Because if you're constantly entertaining the prospect, then you're going to be just like overly involved with your own psychological states in a way that's unhealthy. And you're not actually engaging with the real thing, the real person, so that you can respond to that relationship, so that you can grow in that relationship, so that you can genuinely delight in that relationship. And then when you come to that date, reevaluate. And if you're like, this is better than it was, well, then just set another date, pick another date, 6 weeks, 8 weeks further, and then reevaluate then. Because I just don't think that you can be in a constant state of perpetual discernment. I think that like when you start dating somebody, you're like, yeah, this could work. Let's go, And I think that you could be very happy married to probably like 18 different people in your canton in Switzerland. It's just a matter of just kind of dating a bit to find out, who one of those persons is.
Yeah. And who's kind of ready at the same time you are.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, that's really great to hear you say all that. That's kind of similar to what I encouraged him to do in my reply. So that's really good to hear. Yeah. Because you get, my husband and I got engaged 5 months after we met.
Nice.
I rarely hear that ever from anybody. And I sometimes don't want to share that because I'm like, I don't want to set up this expectation that you have to know right away. My husband knew on the first date. He was like, if Stacy would have me, I would marry her right now. That was his first date, thing. But he'd never been on a date with any girl before. And like, how often does that happen in the world? Like, that is extremely unusual. But then, I see other couples too, who are so happy and they had to date for like 3 years and figure stuff out and, like really work on stuff before they got to the point where they were ready to make that commitment. And that's okay too. God kind of just, it's going to be an individual thing, but thank you for that. I'll make sure to tell him to listen to this episode.
Tell him to listen to this episode and also tell him to help me with shipping.
I will.
Thank you.
He's probably really good at it,
Undoubtedly.
It must be a Swiss like skill.
It's good. I mean, I thought, no, I'm not going to talk about this anymore. It's too triggering. My little fragile self can't handle it.
Smell your Yankee candle. Is it lit right now? Is it good?
Oh, you better believe it's. Are you kidding?
For those who are listening instead of watching, they're going to be like, "What is going on?"
You expect me to make it through this evening without, this Yankee candle? No, it'd be impossible.
I see it's already gotten a lot of love. It's like right at the bottom there.
Oh yeah.
I would send you another one if it weren't so hard to ship.
Thank
Sorry
you.
about
that
that.
means a lot.
Yeah. Maybe I'll just send you a gift card and then you can ship it to yourself.
That's not a bad idea. Yeah, you can. Never mind. Stop.
Yeah.
I can't get concrete about my suggestions, or else I'll sound like I'm just like a freeloader.
Vow of poverty.
Yeah. I came onto your podcast to ask for stuff. Stop it. Moving on. Keep going.
Part of my tithing. It's fine. All right, cool. So let's talk a little bit more about desire. So, it changes, it's capricious. It can feel selfish to consider, what we want as important. And this is a huge area of guilt. You've kind of touched on it already. And I've talked with a lot of people who think that God really wants our sacrifice, but he doesn't want us to have what we desire. So what, from a Thomistic perspective, can you tell me about like rational appetite, using that in consideration of our desire when we discern? So some of this we've already touched on, but, love to hear a Thomistic answer for this.
Yeah, totes.
Yeah.
I guess certainly God expects of us or kind of asks of us or prompts us to offer sacrifice. Mm-hmm. Our sanctification, subsequent to the passion, death, and resurrection of our Lord Jesus Christ, will always ever assume the shape that it took in his life, right? Mm-hmm. So that's the idea, behind Ephesians 5:21-32. He's subordinated to each other out of love for Christ. Wives, subordinated to your husbands. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church. This idea is that like marriage actually serves as a concrete sign of Christ's love for the church, right? That's what it's meant to signify. And how did Christ love the church? He loved it sacrificially. So how are you to love each other? You're to love each other sacrificially. So yeah, sacrifice is a big part. And I guess when talking about desire, I don't mean to describe desire in a kind of crass way that's like, what's your vocation? Your vocation is to eat all kinds of gummy bears, right? And to like go to Topper's Spa, and also to have deep tissue massages. And it's also to go on wild vacations to Costa Rica, the Caribbean side, not the Pacific side. Right. It's not just to say like, you're going to get everything you want, because that's a kind of like desire-based prosperity gospel, which is creepy. Okay. Like, how is the Lord actually going to treat you concretely? He's probably going to tear you to pieces. Okay. Because such has been my experience. Right. But I think that like the happiness that I'm trying to describe is more a sense of metaphysical fit than it is of like, yay, everything is awesome. So it's like the conviction that you are precisely where you ought to be. And again, that's not necessarily a psychological conviction, okay? Because I was not convinced that I should have visited 3 DHL Expresses today and then subsequently visited the post office, having returned to my convent twice in between those 4 visits. Although the optician was nice and the library was fine, right? That I took no delight in that. But I was walking to the 3rd DHL Express up the Rue de Perrault to the Tamoil. I was asking the Lord, I was like, Lord, give me a gentle handling. I was like, I'm feeling real weak right now. I'm feeling like I'm just frustrated. Like, please, will you have them accept this package and just send it and man, never see it again. And then they rejected it. And I came back and you know what didn't happen to me? I didn't die, right? The ground didn't open up and swallow me whole. Turns out I could have been pushed a little bit further. And now I'm okay. You know, like I'm okay. Will I sleep tonight? Remains to be seen, but I'm okay. Okay. So like the Lord gives you what you need to make it through. And that's not just because like the Lord is interested in subsistence rations. The Lord is interested in growing you, right? The Lord wants to make you endure, persevere. He wants you to be constant. He wants you to be steadfast because ultimately that will make you more fully yourself. Okay. Yeah. So when I say like the Lord is going to draw out desire, that often means like great difficulty, great difficulty. Yeah. Right? Because I know of no other way, no better way by which to grow human desire. So I think that you have the indication in your desires for what it is that you're made to. All right. And that by following those desires, you gain greater purchase on those things themselves. But that in order for those desires to kind of gain their full purchase or kind of assume their full scope, right? You're going to suffer for them, right? They're going to cause you great pain. Because if you never desired anything, you wouldn't have to move. You could just lay on your couch. It'd be awesome in a certain weird sloth-like sense. Yeah. Right? But if once you start loving, then you invite the possibility of disappointment. You set a stage of risk. I mean, like life just gets far more dramatic. And with all drama, you know, comes disappointment and comes trial, comes sorrow.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm thinking of so many things. One of the things I was thinking of was the Christmas sloth on the wrapping paper, and about how I'm like, yeah, that kind of sounds great. I'd say like, yeah, as parenthood, it's like my husband and I talk all the time. We're like, it's exhausting. Like we love our children so much, but it also is like, it draws all of your effort, all of your love. There's that line from The Sound of Music, a dream that will need all the love you can give every day of your life for as long as you live. And I think that's maybe an aspect of like, when we think love, we're like, oh, it's going to feel good. And then it's like, oh, well, actually it's going to be all of the things.
It's going to tear you to pieces.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cut you to ribbons, you know, but at the end, you're going to look back and you're going to be like, man, yeah, that's beautiful, you know?
Yeah.
You know, and like for the people who go straight to like, I wouldn't change it for the world. I'm like, I would change it. Okay. I still look back at that and like, I wish, Lord, that you could have grown me in another way. Right. I wish that you could have grown me in another way, but I can see that the way that you did choose to grow me is good in a certain sense, like bizarre, harrowing, sometimes absolutely devastating, but I mean, like it led me to here. Right. And that's good, you know, because he is good.
Right. Right. And I think, you know, obviously the Lord knows what it takes to lead a certain person to a certain thing. And sometimes I'm like, oh, it took him leading me to marriage and motherhood to break me down in these specific ways that I needed to be. Now I can have a little bit of perspective because I've been married for 4.5 years and I'm past the like, what is happening? You know, like entrance into marriage and motherhood. Now I can look back and I can see like, yeah, like I needed to be broken down in that way. It sounds like I'm in an abusive relationship. I'm not.
Nice.
It's just to be clear.
The great thing about your kidnapper is that eventually you begin to like them. And then when they set you free, you return to them. I read about it. It's called Stockholm Syndrome, and it's great.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. I look back and I'm like, I needed that. All of my listeners are going to be like, okay, click.
Right. Yeah.
Unsubscribe.
Creepy. Moving on.
Yeah. No. But the point being just like God breaks you down in the particular ways that you actually need to be in order to be built back up. And sometimes I think, I mean, obviously you've had a day like this where you don't see yet that perspective, you don't see that bigger perspective, like, you know it, but it doesn't feel like it. And that can sometimes that's exhausting. Yeah. But you're doing the things.
And honestly, I think that like oftentimes you'll never know the reason for which, at least this side of the grave. Right. But I think that what is asked of you is that you continue to put it before the Lord. Right. Because when you ask the Lord, like, what is the meaning of this? Or what is the meaning of my life? You get him. Right. You get him, and your mind is gradually assimilated to the mind of God, right? You gain a greater and greater sensitivity to his providence. Like you can, you acquire a knack for the disposition of his will such that you yourself can lend your assent more wholeheartedly to what it is that he's doing. But for the most part, it will evade you, you know? And so you could say, yes, Lord, I believe, as you toddle home from the turmoil, having been rejected for the third time. Right. You can say that, like, yes, Lord, I believe. And it can feel almost like duplicitous. You're like, I don't actually lend my real wholehearted assent to this, but that's okay. That's just keep putting it before the Lord. Just keep putting it before the Lord, and the Lord will continue to give you himself. And that's a source of greatest certainty, right? And it's not a psychological certainty that says like, yes, I have done exactly the things today that I ought to have done. I can't tell you that, you know, but I know that, like, provided that it's the Lord's, and that I didn't completely lose my cool, you know, at the Migros supermarket where, like, the lady was like, yeah, don't do it. This isn't, nope, not going to work. And I was like, listen, you know, I didn't lose my relationship with the Lord in that. You know, I had some sense of it. And as a result of which, it's fodder. It's fodder for growth. It's fodder for conversation. It's fodder for love.
Yeah. It comes back again to that you're not a human doing, you're a human being. And it's all about, the growth of that relationship. Beautiful. So last thing I would love to touch on here before we go is, again, going back to the St. Thomas Aquinas talk that I heard you give. You rejected this notion that when we acquire one virtue, we acquire all virtues. So you said, and I hope I'm quoting you correctly here, you said that each one of us is sort of called to particular manifestations of certain virtues according to our unique personality. And you gave the beautiful example of St. Maximilian Kolbe, who exhibited extraordinary courage. I love St. Maximilian Kolbe. And for anyone who's listening who doesn't know much about his story, he died he was in Auschwitz in the concentration camp, and he took the place of a man who was going to be put in a starvation bunker, and instead he said, take me instead. This man is married, he has a family, I don't have a family, I'm a Catholic priest, take me instead. And he died praising the Lord, in starvation. And just so that actually spoke to me so much in the times that we're living right now, because I'm like, he died without seeing the Auschwitz liberated, without seeing the defeat of the Nazis, but he just gave his life in this courageous way in that moment. So anyway, you were talking about kind of the interaction of personality and virtue. So how do those things connect, and how are we supposed to ever know what virtues we're actually called to exhibit? Or is it the kind of thing where it's like, people are going to look back on your life and they're going to be like, she was a woman of courage. He was a man of, fortitude or whatever.
Yeah. He was a man who didn't know when to stop talking. So I think that, it's a classic pagan teaching, actually, that when you get one virtue, you get them all. This is Aristotle teaches this with respect to prudence. And St. Thomas actually teaches the same thing. He who has one virtue has them all. And that's just because you get them at baptism, in effect, right? And all the virtues have a kind of unity in charity, right? So when... when you have grace, you have faith, hope, charity, you have prudence, justice, fortitude, temperance, you have all the allied virtues that come in their wake. In the Lord's case, the Lord didn't have faith or the Lord didn't have hope, because you don't need faith when you see God, you don't need hope when you possess God, etc. Right? But by and large, with that kind of narrow exception, also the Lord didn't have penitence because he didn't sin. You would have all the virtues. So whoever has one virtue has them all. Actually, whatever. Side story, and I'm gonna table.
So I got that wrong. So you do get one virtue when you get them all?
You do get all the virtues when you get one. Yeah. But what I did suggest is that St. Thomas says you don't get them all in the same express fashion, right? So what do I mean? So he says that they grow proportionately like the fingers on a hand. All right. So some will be more like, pinky, and some of them will be more like thumb. So some of them come to more prominent or more peculiar expression. And so that's what I was trying to draw out, saying basically it functions like temperament. In your life, certain virtues will come to the fore more strongly than other virtues, as it were, or you'll exhibit certain virtues more peculiarly than other people do. Okay. And so that's why I would say, like St. Maximilian Kolbe with courage. I would say a similar thing like St. Jean de Brébeuf, for instance, or humility with respect to St. Therese of Lisieux, or hope with respect to St. John Paul II, things like that. And so I think part of the story of you discerning what it is that you're concretely called to do is discerning, like what are the most grand, what are the most bold, what are the most, I have this like very small fly in front of me. What are the most expressed desires that the Lord has drawn out of my heart? Because those probably give decent indication as to how you're to glorify him. And, was that something that St. Maximilian Kolbe thought about concretely when he offered his life? No. Like you said, he said, I am a priest, right? By virtue of who he was, he did what he did. The man for whom he kind of gave his life, Franciszek Ivanchik, he actually said he struggled for a while with the fact that he had permitted St. Maximilian Kolbe to replace him. But he said he came to peace when he realized that a man like Maximilian could not have done otherwise. So there are certain things that the Lord does in you which make it such that you cannot do otherwise, right? They're just very strong, very prominent, very manifest. And I think part of the story of how you give glory to God uniquely and peculiarly is kind of figuring out what that is. And other people will tell you, you can take the St. Catherine of Siena personality inventory, or you just talk to your friends, or you just ask the Lord to make it known. But yeah, I think knowing is part of the story. It's not everything. You're going to give glory in that way, regardless of whether or not you recognize it, but recognizing helps.
Cool. We have never on this podcast yet really talked about discerning like what virtues you're called to, in a sense, because of course you're called to all of them. But I just thought that'd be kind of an interesting little side street to go down of just like discerning your particular like. I always think of like when I envision certain people, like there's like a trail they leave behind them of certain qualities, and you think about, I'm not thinking of like a smell of somebody, but that sounds terrible. Most people I know don't leave a smell behind them, but the certain, something that comes out that you can't even necessarily describe where that comes from or why, but they just have that and they exhibit that consistently. And the more you know them, the more that seems, you could look at something, you could be like, oh, that's so-and-so, that's so this person that I know. So yeah, I actually kind of think that would be a really interesting exercise to do with your with your friends. Just say like, what do I exhibit? Or what do you think, what do you see in me? That'd be kind of a fascinating thing. Or maybe spiritual director would be better, because your friends will be like, oh, you're so good looking or something. Well, think you're good friends. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Father Gregory. This has been really, really wonderful. I know we went all over the place, but I absolutely loved our conversation. And thank you so much for making time. I know you probably have to go, sleep or write your dissertation or whatever. Yeah. If you ever, I'm sure you'll make it back to DC at some point. I'm not far, so you're so welcome at my house out in Winchester. You ever been out to Winchester?
Just a drive through.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah.
On my way to
most
mountains.
people. Okay. Fair enough. Yeah. It's very beautiful here. So yeah, come on out and have some tomato sauce with maybe even with pasta. I'll make you homemade pasta too.
Perf. That'd be delicious.
That's another one of my specialties. So yeah, but thank you so much for making time. It's been just a pleasure talking with you.
Yeah. My joy.
Yeah. All right. Well, God bless you. Thank you so much. And Merry almost Christmas.
Hey, cheers. You too.
Thank you.